All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being with us today, this afternoon, and welcome inside the Implementation Lab. We are very happy to welcome you today to discuss the following topic, which is about how to master mid-market and corporate success. But first thing first, here is the QR code to our pad, so in case you would like to write down your questions, just feel free to scan it, and of course we will review your questions at the end of this presentation. So I just let few seconds for my great colleagues to scan the pad, and here it is. All right. Maybe some of you in the room might know, but Odoo's main mission has always been about helping SMEs. But a few years ago, we had bigger companies that started to contact us. And there it is. This is how mid-market and corporate team has born. But we have to be honest with you. Our very first project with big clients were quite of epic. Indeed, the first clients used to see us as too young, too inexperienced, too flexible, and some of them even called us cowboys. So actually we had no choice than to evolve. So we made some mistakes and we learned a lot of those mistakes. And that's how the mid-market and corporate team became the 1.0 to 2.0. Today, with Margot, Key Account Manager, and Thibaut, Project Director, both from mid-market and corporate team, we are very happy to present you the 5 key challenges that we face in most of our projects, and we're going to share with you the best practices. Let's get started with one of the first challenge, which is about having a good start. So I propose you that we very quickly jump onto the weekly meeting that Thibaut and Margot has to see how is the best practices.
Hello Thibaut.
Hello Margot.
How are you?
Really good, thank you. What about you?
Very good indeed. I've been in contact with the client for months now, and I just learned that they will go with Odoo and that you will be the project director on this project, so really happy. It's really a strategic client because we are in a pilot phase, and if we succeed with this pilot phase, it's going to bring a lot of opportunity. So I really need the best team to be assigned on this project. The client has limited budget, high expectation, and short deadline. They want to be live July next year. So Thibaut, I really count on you to challenge them a maximum, and please stick to our methodology.
I really have the feeling that's always the same story, right?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so if we have to go fast, maybe we can just start with the kickoff as tomorrow.
It's good to see that you want to move fast, Thibaut, but I did not mention that it's not only about one spoke for this project. Indeed, the client has a team composed of 8 people, so I think that we should maybe first align.
Indeed, Margot, you're right. That's a very good point here. What we used to have as team when we first started the mid-market and corporate project, it was more a one-to-one the client. So indeed, we had the project director, which was mainly in contact with the single point of contact. But since few years, weeks, months happened, and we had more and more projects, and the team has changed over time. Today we have a team composed of many different roles. So on Odoo side, we have the roles as project directors, which is composed with the consultants, technical consultants, and developers. And the Odoo team is directly in contact with the client team, which is composed of the product owner. So the product owner is really responsible to deliver a minimum viable product to the end users on time and budget. And with the product owner, there is the more on-field team. So there is the business owners, which works very closely with the consultant, the tech lead as well. But since few years as well, we see more and more a new role in the team, which is the adoption manager. The adoption manager has a main objective to make sure that the end users will adopt the tool in the end.
Okay, Cass, so following what you say, I'd have to contact now the product owner, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
What about defining a bit the role and responsibilities? We used to use this beautiful matrix, you know, the RACI matrix. I think we should at least find a minimum, put who is responsible for what, at least for the main activities, get a bit of involvement for each people as well, knows who will validate the work, less involved maybe, but really important as well for the process. Maybe the ones who will give the advice, and then in the end, those that will be informed. No.
I think that this complete matrix is a bit too heavy at this stage of the project. For me, it's really nice that the role and responsibility are clear to the client, but don't spend a lot of time to build a complete matrix RACI at this stage.
Indeed, Marlo, you're right. But still, a RACI matrix might be interesting. What we can see here is that we have different responsibilities, such as responsible, accountable, consultant, informed, and all those different responsibilities are split between the different roles in the team, so between the product owner, the business owners, the adoption manager maybe, and we can see that all of those different responsibilities might happen at different stages of the project, such as business validation, spec validation, release validation. So that's really something that we need to bear in mind.
Yes, and this is only an example. I mean, every time that we met the client, we have to know which kind of stuff that we need to put on paper. I mean, there is sometimes with the client, high segregations of duties, you know. The one who will define the need will not be the one who will validate the budget in the end. Sometimes it's important we define that since the beginning, so we know how to operate with them.
One last thing, Thibaut.
Okay.
I did not mention at the beginning, but the client exists for many years now, so they have a lot of IT software in place. I don't know, what do you think, guys, but we could, for example, review their current architecture.
That's an interesting point, Marlo. Indeed, when we face big clients, what we used to see is that big companies used to not start from scratch. Indeed, they already have existing systems, sometimes many of them, and actually they already have some habits with the current system. So they are used to work in a certain way with due solution. So it's really key to discuss with the client which tools need to be replaced, and if not, then what will be the potential integrations with other systems, and in the end, we should make sure that everyone is aligned on the same page.
Yes, and that's really the discussion I like to have in the beginning of a project, you know, discussing about softwares, the one we will keep, the one we will just let it go, and that brings a lot of discussion and also the knowledge, so we can learn a lot from those discussions, right? Another part that I'd like a bit less is really organize me with some IT departments. So as we know, sometimes working with a huge organization means working also with IT department and internal developers. And you know, sometimes we got the question, okay, how do you work? We explain the methodology, we have the own methodology here in Odoo, and of course we always have the answer like, this is really not the way we work. So it's also a challenge that we have to tackle, right?
Yeah, I know, Thibaut, and I know that you don't really like to do it, but actually you will have no choice than to do it. So guys, if we sum up a bit, regarding the initiation of a project, there is 3 main aspects to take into consideration. First, the number of stakeholders, but not only the numbers, who will be the stakeholders? Second, what will be the task, what will be their duties in the end? And finally, we should take into account the company background. That's really key to success.
Yes, and all this complexity takes a lot of time to prepare. So first I will need to contact the product owner, and then start with him to explain the role and the responsibilities, maybe define that at the minimum with him. Of course, in the beginning of a project, we don't have to face everything or to plan everything, but at least the first phase, you know, knowing exactly what will be the scope that will be implemented and with who. And of course, once everything is done, we can really co-present the kickoff with the product owner, actually. And I really insist on the co-presentation. Victorine? I really insist on that because, to be honest, it really showed the involvement since the beginning, and it really helps also the team in front to be involved in the project initiation.
One last question, Thibaut. We already spent a lot of time during the initiation of the project to discuss with the key stakeholder, to present the key topic of the project. Should we really keep this kickoff?
Yes, and it's really important to have it just because the kickoff should be the decision. It's not a meeting where we can have discussions, where we have to align. So we align everything up front, and in the end, we are sure that everybody will be on the same page when we start the project.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, guys, I think that we find a good first initiation phase. So now that we are ready to move forward, let's jump on to the next challenge, which is about how to collaborate with third parties. Indeed, Thibaut, you mentioned a good topic here, which is about co-presenting with the product owner. That's a first collaboration, but then we need to take into account any third parties collaboration. What could be the third parties? The third parties could be an external product owner, could be a partner, could be an external company that has some expertise in change management. So let's continue with Margot and Thibaut to see how we can collaborate with third parties.
Hello again, Thibaut. Do you remember the other day I was speaking about the client team composed about 8 people, but in fact the client just called me and they have a strange idea, but they want to include some internal developer on their side into the project team. What do you think?
Actually, I think we should keep and stick to what we decided in the beginning. What do you think about that?
I don't think that the client will like this answer, and when I'm thinking about it, I think it could bring like added value on the project, maybe improve the velocity. If we take the example, a few years ago, we had this Italian client for which we had to build the entire accounting software. We had no expertise in terms of Italian localization, and at the end, their internal developer was really a help on the project.
Yes, Margot. Of course, I'm complaining a bit, but it can be an added value to add extra parties into the project. I think we really should be really strict about it. We should really organize that. But what we see is like the bigger the project and the little the place of Odoo is. So we are kind of just a piece in a big puzzle, and so it's completely fine to include other people that knows best better things than us, like other software, or to integrate stuff. So it's important that we can include them, but we really have to be strict on the beginning on how to collaborate, right?
Okay, guys, that's an interesting topic. Indeed, having collaboration with third parties can bring sometimes some risk, but on the other side, it can bring a lot of added value. If we first discuss a bit about the risk, what could they be? First, discussing about the code. Who is the owner of the code? But not only who is the owner of the code, who is the owner of the review of the code? And then who is the owner of the maintenance of the code? And what about the bugs? Who is the owner of resolving the bugs? Another question could be, is the third party really capable to help? Do they have the skills? Do they have the capabilities? Do they have the resource internally to really help us? Another topic that I kind of like as risk on third-party collaboration is what about project management? When we have a third parties on board, it might bring more project management on the project, more meetings, more alignments with the third party. So we really need to make sure that this is not too much and that we stick onto the client's projects. But on the other hand, and as Margot said, third-party collaboration can bring a lot of added value. Indeed, such as the Italian example, sometimes there are some local needs for which we do not have expertise, but the third parties has experience and has expertise, so that's great. Also, it can bring more proximity with the end client because we are all together working on the same project. Proximity might be compared to autonomy. Indeed, the client can be more autonomous on the project if there is internet developer involved on the project in itself. And finally, and because we work all together on the same project, we might be more efficient on the client's project because we have this parallel work which is done together.
Okay, Cassandra, but going back to my project, when I think again about it, I really see it as a good collaboration. And if we can, for example, give them the responsibility for the integration with Odoo and their in-house manufacturing software, I really think that they are the best to do it.
Okay. Well, maybe it's a good idea, but maybe we have to find that the plan is not enough. So I think we should always think about a plan which considers as well the what-if situation, what can go wrong. So in the past, we used to start a collaboration with partners or just internal developers, being just a bit too shy, a bit like bisounours, like we say it in French, saying that we only consider that everything will be all right. Now we notice that sometimes it goes really well, actually, but sometimes not. And in that case, we always have to plan that up front and already communicate to the partner what will be the actions if something is not going well. So we don't have the surprise, you know. So what can go wrong? Many stuff, actually. So what if we find a bug? That's an easy one. What if the collaboration is not going well? What if the developer is just not good enough? So we have to stop the collaboration. that kind of situation is really hard to live, let's say, and it's really hard to find a quick solution. That's why we prefer to anticipate and try to find actually the actions up front, so there is no surprise.
Okay, I think you have a point here, Thibaut. I always tend to think that everyone is awesome as us.
Don't worry, Margot, we are still the best in the world. All right, here I just would like to share with you 2 real-life scenarios that we had. We discussed a bit about theory, then what happened in practice. Actually, here we had 2 cases, one on the left side, which was a bit of complex, quite difficulties in the end, and on the right side of the screen, I think it's the opposite from where you are seated, where actually the case was a good one, and the success was there in the end. On the left part, the third party was actually the mother company. Here the need was about having a change management process in place. The third party involved in the change management was the mother company of the end client, meaning the subsidiary. That was not easy. Why? Because actually it brings a lot of conflict of interest, it brings a lack of neutrality, and in the end, the end client saw the project implementation as an obligation to do instead of a need to change the tool. While on the opposite, we had the same need, so the need to have a change management process in place. That's why we asked an external company to get involved on the project, and this project was a great success. Why? Because the third party was indeed an external company, so there were no involvement in the end client. There were a lot of neutrality, and we really see that between the client, the third party, and Odoo, it was a real collaboration all together.
Okay, Cass, but can we go back again on my client, because we are adding new people on the project. I think it's gonna bring complexity, so I have the feeling that we are losing a bit the control of the project.
Yeah, Margot, I know you are a control freak kind of person, but don't worry, that's the next challenge. So let's see together how should we manage risk without over-controlling them.
Okay, so the first topic would be only don't shoot flies with a bazooka. So in other words, the idea is that we have to focus only, so dedicate all the time we have in bottlenecks. So we don't have to split the time in different small tasks that maybe are not really useful to follow, and we really have to dedicate everything we have in those bottlenecks only.
Okay, Thibaut, but how do you identify bottleneck if you don't check at least everything once?
Yeah, so the question is like, is there an elephant hidden behind the fly, right? All right, so how do we do that? First, it's really easy to say, give autonomy. So it looks like a bit bullshit, but it's really important that we give the autonomy to the team, not only internal team, but also the team of the client. The idea is that if the people knows why we are doing stuff, and if the process is well made, normally can be either the consultant or even the client can identify risk by themselves, or as well correct and find directly the solution. All right. So giving autonomy is easy to say, not always easy to do, especially if you have less experienced people in your teams. So sometimes, you have to control a bit what is going on. So it's not about a real control, it's about challenging them. So to challenge them, the idea is not asking closed question, just asking, okay, is everything okay? The answer will be always yes. The idea is more to ask open question, to ask them to show actually what they are doing, or ask them why they are doing some stuff. I think that's the most important. Then, if we have autonomy, and if we explain what we expect from people, we avoid to have the thing you see on the left, a mess project we don't want. We really want a project on the right, like easy to read, easy to understand, and actually where we can identify the risk really easily. If you have both of them, and if you know a bit about the Kanban, actually the idea is really to master it, because it's really telling you a story behind. So just entering into your project, you already know where are the bottlenecks, where are the urgent tasks, the one who takes where issues. Of course, you have other kind of KPIs you can follow, like the velocity of the project or the percentage of completion. And this, it takes no time to see if you have a clean Kanban, and that's for what that's really important to make everybody align on the way we work.
Okay, Thibaut, but when I was mentioning that I'm afraid about controlling this project, I was more referring to the budget control.
Yes, actually the budget is not something that is really in our hands. We don't really know the budget of the client. We have only an estimation of it, so that's not something we should really care.
But my client wants to know what he will be paying at the end of the project.
Yes, and that's another story. Actually, you're more referring to cost management, and that's what we can see in the yellow line. So we always have to communicate about the expected cost and what actually will cost the project in the end. That's really important that we follow that, and we don't care actually about the budget, because the budget is something that the client will define by himself. While expected costs, we have a bit more of flexibility. We can decide to communicate stuff with a lot of if we are risk averse or not. Let's take, for example, you are building a house. It's completely fine in the beginning to say, okay, the house will cost that amount of money. And then after a while, you just want to add a wooden floor, extra windows. So it's completely fine if your project cost is going up and down as soon as you communicate to the client. And how do we monitor that? How do we know that we have an expected cost which is higher? Basically, we look at the actual cost, simply. The thing that we do quite easily since a long period of time, actually, is qualifying the task, just saying, okay, this is a change request, we can estimate, we can communicate that to the client. He can say if yes or no he's agreeing or not. But something new, well, we start to do it more and more, is like also trying to manage the efficiency of what we consume. That's really important. I can give you a small example. Let's say that I'm assigned on a project for 8 hours per week. Of course, after a few weeks, I can see if I manage my efficiency that I use 10 hours per week. For 1 week is okay, for 2 weeks is okay. If you let it go like that, on a two-year basis, it can go really for 200 hours more. So it's really important that we identify if it's something like unique or if we have to change the way of working, or we can also communicate to the client the expected costs.
Thank you very much, Thibaut, for having taken the time to explain this
You're welcome.
distinguish between cost and budget. I'm pretty sure that some people has learned something in the room. But guys, I mean, if we go back to this project, right? I have the feeling that so far what we control is really the processes, is the documentation, is the costs. So all of that, I think it's under control. But there is still one thing that we are missing. I mean, what about human?
Not human again.
Thibaut, I don't totally agree with you on this topic, because if we think about an implementation, it's not only having some need that we deliver to the client on time and on budget. Indeed, when we speak about an Odoo implementation, and especially for MMC client, and if we look at all the type of impact that the project could have on people, Thibaut, according to you, what is likely to change?
Okay, so I would say at least systems. So they are coming from SAP, Microsoft, right? Going to Odoo. Then maybe tools, I would say. They can have printers, new stuff to configure. And let's say, yeah, the mindset. I already discussed that before. You know, the ones who are likely to change, the other that are stick to their habits. That's something that I don't like.
Yeah, you're right. When we speak about an Odoo implementation, it's like a huge project, and depending on the scope, it can have impact on people. In fact, as from 3 different impacts here, it's highly recommended to have a dedicated team and a specific change management strategy.
I'm very curious about what you're going to say, guys, because I don't know if you remember the 2 real-life scenarios that I presented earlier. I have the feeling that at that time we missed a bit of strategy for the change management, so I'm really curious to hear you.
Yes, and to avoid such situation, we started to consider two parts in the project. We have the implementation part, the one we know, which is represented by the boat. It's the need that we deliver to the client. But we have now a new side, the people side, the one we tend to maybe underestimate over the past few years. And if we take a parallel to our project, it would be like to move from a deserted island like SAP to the wonderful island which is Odoo.
Yeah, but you're talking about the boat, you're talking that we are implementing, so I guess we are the boat and the people on it, it's not our job actually to do that.
You are right on one thing, Thibaut. We are not change manager at Odoo. But if we take the scenario without change management, look at the slides. We will have a boat with no one to sail it, and at the end, the adoption will be zero, so no success. If we want to have the people side on the boat, we really need to engage a new crew and to make them want to use this new boat.
Okay, I mean that's a nice slide, but then how do you do that actually?
We could, for example, take the ADCAR model. ADCAR, Thibaut, is the acronym for the 5 stages that each people in the organization needs to go through to have a successful transformation. We have the A for awareness. The people need to understand why they need to move from one island to the other one. Then we have the desire. They really need to understand what's in it for me. Why do I need to move from one island to the other? After the 2 first stage, we can start the training. It's about knowledge. And then we have the ability. It's not only that because the people are trained that they can use the tool. And we will end with the reinforcement so that we make sure that the people don't get back to their old habits. And especially for MMC client, we are not talking about onboarding 1, 5, 20 people. It's about hundreds of them. So it really makes sense to have a specific and dedicated team for dealing with change management.
Yeah, you're mentioning like 400 people. Everyone needs to go through the curve with a lot of activities, a lot of people behind to follow them. So I think it's really cost a lot of money.
Thibaut, are you really listening? If we go back to this slide, I think it's quite easy to convince the client to invest in change management. Look at the journey without change management. It's much longer, so it will cost a lot of money to the client. And as I mentioned, the boat arrives empty, so no adoption, and the project cannot be a success.
Okay, I think you convinced me, all right? But so far we have discussed about initiation, we have discussed about process. Actually we add complexity in everything. I really feel that we lose the Odoo mindset here. Like, you know, deliver fast, be fast, on time, on budget, 25 hours back, everything like that. Really, I really think that soon we will have to wear ties.
Yeah, but Thibaut, I would love to see you wearing ties. But in any case, we are dealing with big companies now, so what do you suggest then?
Well, actually, I just suggest to keep it simple like it was before. Yes, I have a few examples if you like. All right, so here, a few examples of how to keep simple. First, KPIs. We always have requests from customer to create some KPIs like risk monitoring, where we have a likelihood, impact, a lot of value. That's something we try to avoid, or at least we have to think about it and see if it's really relevant to do it. Better do the one below, like reducing the number of value, so every time that the value change actually triggers something. If you don't do that, you have a KPI which is beautiful with a lot of colors, but if you change from slightly insignificant to minor slightly, it will not change anything to your life, right? Then always challenge the way of working. So I got an example here about the sprints. That's something we used to follow every time we do a project. But more and more we ask ourselves the question, okay, is it always necessary? We see in some project, not all, sometimes it works, but we see that it brings more change requests. The client is not always following the rhythm that we want to put. So we have to re-explain stuff. We have to wait for more validation, and we multiply every process, meeting and stuff like that. So, and for the developer, it's really not something good either. So it's like starting something, waiting, stopping, restart again. yeah, it's a bit like Ferrari in Brussels, actually. So the idea would be do more at once. If you do that, in some case it works, like I said, in some case not. So it's already a use case, I mean, a case by case situation. But if you do that, you can block everything in once, in one planning, and you can manage to do something really faster, all right? So it's not always happening that way. Sometimes the customer doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know what are the needs, he's not ready, etc. That kind of stuff we hear like every day. So what we try to do now is really to convert like the business analyst we have in real counselor, meaning that we really have to give an advice and give the best value we have for the customer. So we decide actually instead of the customer. So it just needs to validate what we decide for him. That's a bit the idea. Another example for specs. So we come from specs with really long text, really long explanation, and it was really hard to read sometimes. And now we go for more visual mock-ups, always with annotations, short text, each wins. I mean, we can earn a lot of time, a lot of money doing that. So just try it, okay? And last but not least, meetings. So meetings are sometimes important, but we try to avoid them. So the idea is like for one-to-one, it's nice if you want to, let's say, coach someone on a specific task, with your team, or just for a quick meeting just to align. But the idea is to avoid group meeting, or the red flag would be the recurring meetings. So recurring meetings means what? The meeting you are like every week, just 5 minutes before, wondering what you will say, and it's complex to say no to the customer, so we will say, okay, let's do that meeting, I have nothing to say. I guess everyone has that kind of meeting in his agenda. But we try to remove them, we try to convince the client not to do it either, and we try to be actually free for the stuff that really matters for the implementation. And if you don't believe me, just look, that's a print screen of the agenda of Fabien. That's not a joke, so he's applying exactly what we try to do.
Okay guys, shouldn't we ask Fabien to invite us to a lunchtime? I mean...
Okay, and then... So, if you want more about some tips like that, there is a talk actually, which is how Odoo transform corporate implementation, so also for big clients, but keeping it simple. Unfortunately, it's happening now in the other room, so you can just, let's say, find the YouTube, and it will be as good, I hope.
All right, guys, thank you, Thibaut, thank you, Marlo. Thank you everyone in the room. Maybe to quickly summarize what we said, do you remember that Odoo has always been about small and medium-sized company, but then we had bigger clients that contacted us. At the beginning we made a lot of mistakes, but in the end we learned a lot of those projects. And all in all, what is very key for us is that we would like to avoid a bureaucratic nightmare on project. Instead, we are committed to provide to our clients a sustainable environment with a tool they love and with a project implementation that they really enjoy in the end. So I hope that you guys enjoy as well this talk. And if you have any questions, then just feel free to complete the pad to ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay guys, so for the questions, the first questions I have is, do you have examples of Odoo big clients, and how long did it take to implement them?
We could have, for example, the example of Ego Kitchen, which is a quite famous client in Belgium. So we had different phases, but it's like a big client in Belgium for which we implemented the Odoo solution on our own and with this methodology.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I also saw that one of your colleagues also answered a bit of more in details about this. When should the budget be validated? At the start or many times during the project?
Well, actually the budget is never stopped. So it depends. Sometimes the budget, we have a strict budget since the beginning and we never have to overpass. But then we will challenge as hell just to not have extra stuff on the to do. But most of the time we have an estimation of a cost, and actually over time we notice that the customer needs to implement more, and at that moment we will always ask for the validation. So we estimate what he wants. We say, okay, if you do that, it will cost that amount of money, and you just have to accept or not. And if not, then we stick to standard, and it's okay. But it needs to be validated before we actually start the implementation. I mean, the start to do the job.
Okay, great. It's a large question, but maybe you have ideas. How long does it take to implement Odoo? Do you have examples?
It depends. So it can take, let's say, a few weeks. Allez, we have sometimes small projects that can go really in few days, but for the bigger ones, it can take a few years to implement, and some of them we never finish. So it's always a continuous story. So it really depends on the size of the project. You can be stick to a project until your retirement if you want.
What are important points for a kickoff presentation with your clients?
So yes, the kickoff presentation is a bit like everything that you need to start basically the implementation. So we just have to remind about the scope that will be implemented in the coming days. Also the methodology that we will apply, like, okay, this is the way we will work, those person will be in charge of that, those person will be in charge of that, so everybody knows what needs to be done. And then we have also a planning for short run, let's say planning, or also a macro planning, and actually we can add many stuff in the kickoff depending on what we build with the customer. Okay, so I would say, okay, again, it depends, but we try at least to with this kickoff to start implementing directly after, and we have let's say with this kickoff normally people knows what to do for the coming months.
Okay, and what is your process when the customer wants to add a whole set of new features, etc., but the deadline doesn't need to change?
Well, we say no. We always
question.
have the constraints. So again, we ask the client, he has the choice. So either we stick to what we said and we decide to go for what we define in the beginning, so we stick to the deadline, or we say, okay, if you want that, we postpone and we add what you want to do. But we try to avoid that, because otherwise we'll never go live. It's always important to stick to what we define in the beginning, challenge the maximum, so we can really go live. And once we are going live with a client, it's easy then to add extra features. Normally, if they don't ask that in the beginning, it means that it can be less important features to implement.
Another question would be, how many consultants do you have in Belgium for this project of MMC?
So I think we are around 40 people divided in 4 groups, and by project also it depends. So we try to have the minimum number of BAs, let's say, and developers, but for one team can go from 3 people to 7. I think the 7 is the maximum we had. So 7 people on the same project is something that we can have.
Other question, how do you tackle the problem of too much documentation during the implementation?
Well, I'm not sure to understand the full question, but the documentation, is it the documentation or the documentation of the customer, if you want to precise? Okay. So we create the documentation that will be only necessary for us to upgrade or to maintain the project afterwards. About for example, the documentation that the user will use in the end for his own work, then we give this responsibility to the customer itself. So we don't do it by ourselves. We just have a documentation for us to be able to maintain the code, but not to say how the customer should work. He's more capable of doing his own documentation in that sense.
How is the methodology to gather specification, and how do you handle clients' expectations?
Okay, how do we handle clients' expectations? Well, it's all about discussion. I think it's the most we have in big organization, the more we have to discuss, and sometimes a long period of time. That's sometimes really annoying to discuss with a big client because they have a lot of intervenient people, so they need to align themselves, and sometimes they don't have the same expectations neither. But then we just listen sometimes and try to challenge, and everything. The thing we do internally, like making stuff simple and efficient, and try to be like that always. We try to apply it also to the client and to basically teach him to do the same.
I've got another one. It never stops. Can you explain more the risk management KPIs? How do you manage them in general?
So risk management KPIs, it's let's say that is really based on the client as well. So some clients doesn't need to have a real reporting on that. Others are really like afraid. So we really need to report on specific topics. So it's also based on what the clients required. Okay, but of course we have a kind of management by risks. So like I said, we don't try to cover everything, but we really focus on bottlenecks, and it's based on risk. So if we see that can be a risk for financial risk, we will just tackle it. But instead of having like a matrix and stuff like that, we just mention it on the steering committees, having a lot of communication during the steering committees, make all the message go through these steering committees that we have every month, making sure that we share the risk to the customer, and to see who will be able to tackle the risk, actually, to mitigate it.
Okay, great. I think that we've answered kind of most of the questions. If you guys have other questions, of course, feel free to reach out to our nice group of presentators.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's